Welcome to the My Hero Academia Iceberg. Been a while since I've shown my face on camera, but don't worry, this is just something I want to try out. Do something, branch out a different video format than your typical versus matchups. But I finished watching My Hero Academia and Vigilantes for the first time, and I gotta say, I'm quite a fan of the series. I mean, this is really enjoyable. The story is pretty good, and I've also been wanting to do an iceberg video for the longest time, so what better topic to go over than to do the one that I've just finished watching and just get it done while it's still fresh in my mind. I'll leave timestamps in the comments below, so if you want to skip ahead, and also in the description to skip to different parts of the iceberg and other tiers as well. Major spoilers ahead if you guys haven't finished watching the anime and also haven't finished reading the manga, because that's where I'm going to be covering a lot of this stuff right here. If you guys don't know what an iceberg is, it's pretty much a huge amount of research of one subject, and it's organized into different tiers of how well it is known. The tip of the iceberg is pretty much what everyone can see / known, and the more deeper it goes, the less it is seen and also known. I'll add some of my own addition to this iceberg, because since the one that I find in this one is pretty recent, but also it's still dated, since most of them has been answered in the later seasons and also in the later chapters. But regardless, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's get on to the iceberg. Hero 2 is a song that is from the 4th season of My Hero, and it is performed by the students of Class 1A during the UA Festival arc. If you guys want to listen to it, I'll just link it down below. It's pretty catchy. Vigilantes is canon and is another series of the My Hero universe that takes place 5 years before the 1st season of My Hero, and we follow the main character Koichi, who has the power to glide with his hands and knees. And this series takes a different perspective of how people want to use their quirks for good, but they act outside the law to punish those who they deem are criminals, which makes them vigilantes. Season 1 of My Hero Academia Vigilantes has just finished as the time I've been recording, so I recommend you guys should check it out. It's pretty good and the animations are outstanding. Tenya Ida's hero name, which is Genium, was originally titled to his older brother Tensa Ida, which his hero career unfortunately ended due to injury. Tenya Ida takes it upon himself and takes on the title along with the responsibilities. The meta hate is self-explanatory, mainly due to his perverted nature and his actions. He would come off as cowardly at times, and people wonder how he even got to 1A. There's this poll in Reddit that I just found of who is the most hated My Hero Academia character, and I believe, if I can remember in the top of my head, it goes from All For One, which is kind of like a couple thousand votes. Next is Bakugo, who has like 6,000 votes, and then you have Mineta taking the lead, over 70,000 votes, which is yeah, that tells a lot of why people don't like him. The My Hero Academia popularity is without a doubt has one of the biggest fandoms in this generation, and also the most controversial and also the most hated for many different reasons, to which I'll get into later in this iceberg. Some of the stats you'll see right here on the screen is kind of dated since it's from a few years ago, but this shows where they are at the time compared to the bigger animes. The meaning of Deku is what Bakugo calls Izuku Midoriya as an insult, to which in Japanese pretty much means useless, which Midoriya takes that as his hero name, kind of flipping the narrative as he can actually do anything and not be useless. The movies are canon is pretty much what it says, that all the My Hero Academia movies are canon and is connected to the main series. Many people argue online whether or not the movies are considered canon, but the author Horikoshi claims that he intends to connect the movies and the manga, and there are characters that were featured in the movie showing up later in the series. It's an awkward situation trying to explain that not everything is canon while some parts are canon. Bakugo has anger issue, and this is also self-explanatory. If you guys haven't figured it out already, Bakugo gets angry quite a lot, and people online speculate that there is actually a reason for his angry personality, and that is due to his quirk, Explosion. Bakugo's quirk allows him to create explosion because he sweats nitroglycerin. Nitroglycerin, however, can lower a person's heart rate dramatically, which means if he wasn't constantly stressed and angry, he would die. It's his body's way of keeping him alive. That is not confirmed by the author himself, but it's kind of a cool theory that I can actually get behind. Dr. Tsubasa is All For One's doctor. If you guys haven't seen the show in a minute or might have forgotten this character, Dr. Tsubasa is the same doctor that told little Midoriya that he is quirkless. And at the time, people were speculating that Dr. Tsubasa is actually a bad person working for the villains, which eventually turns out to be true, as he is the man creating the Nomus, helping Shigaraki reach his full potential, and working for All For One. Deku will be the #1 hero. As of recently, the My Hero Academia manga is over, but it did reveal the final rankings of the hero list, which, spoiler ahead if you don't want to hear this, Deku is ranked number 4, and on the hero ranking, it's very impressive for his debut, and also that Mirio is actually number 1. You could say the statement is wrong that Deku never ends up being the #1 hero, but getting the number 4 spot on your debut, that's pretty impressive. We'll never know what ends up happening because it's over, and what I find pretty funny that Bakugo was originally ranked number 4 but dropped down to 15 because of his personality, and then when Deku enters back to the ranking and taking the number 4 spot, he locks in and then rises back up to the number 5. quirks don't always come at age 4. This is referring to a statement that all quirks develop at age 4. I believe people misinterpret that saying because they meant quirks don't manifest after the age of 4 or 5, because you have babies born with quirks before getting to that age, such as the glowing baby as the first ever quirk user. President Mike, when he was born, when he first cried, he made the doctor's ears bleed. As far as late bloomers, Midoriya is the only exception, but the quirk was passed down to him. Dabi is Todoroki. There was a theory going around back then which eventually turns out to be true, that Dabi is part of the Todoroki family, and the theory only strengthens when Shoto revealed he has an older brother that died named Toyo Todoroki, which again turns out to be the case. All Might grooming Deku is pretty much what it says. This claims that All Might is taking advantage of a young teenager at its most vulnerable state of wanting to become a hero, but in order to do that, he got to keep things under wrap, not tell anyone what they're doing. All Might giving Deku some secret gifts, which is the powers, and yeah, when you think about it, the way I'm wording this doesn't sound right at all, but rest assured that is not the case, because this is the most important part of the plot, the main character getting the powers. The origin of Nomus. This ties back to Dr. Tsubasa, who is responsible for creating the Nomus along with All for One's help. The Nomus are essentially made from human corpses loaded with quirks because of All for One, and the name Nomu in Japanese stands for brainless, making them a walking, thoughtless soldier. And there's more theories about Nomus that involves with children, which I'll get into the deeper tiers. Teachers threatening expulsions freely. It's mainly had to do with Aizawa's poor teaching style, threatening to expel those who can't control or utilize their quirks to their advantage, which is later retconned because he would re-enroll them back to the school, and then teaching them a lesson about the importance of failing, and also not wanting the weak students to become a hero and then die. I believe Aizawa should be more of a counselor rather than being a teacher. The only time he actually teaches a student is Shinzo, but he's not even part of Class 1A until later, but aside from that, if I gotta say which teacher is the better teacher, I gotta say Endeavor. He was teaching 3 students at once, and also in a short amount of time, teaching them new abilities and also new moves, how to better understand their quirks. The quirk singularity is basically there will be a point in time in the distant future that quirks will be so powerful and complex to the point where the user's body will not be able to handle them. Quirks will combine like Shoto and become even stronger. I can see this becoming a problem later down the line. You can say Shigaraki is a prime example, but Shigaraki was given the All for One quirk, which thus gets out of control. Same goes for Deku, Aoyama, because their bodies aren't originally made for these quirks that they were given. The only one I can think of is Dabi, which using his quirk burns his body and actually harms him, and is far superior than Endeavor's. Kaminari is more of a comedic effect. The quirk singularity theory is very plausible, but the Doomsday theory is the one I can get behind, which I'll get into later on. My Hero Academia is a dystopian future, and pretty much what it says. This takes place in the future where majority of humans have powers, and the technology is much more advanced compared to ours, and also society shifts because of the rise of those powers. It's pretty much a dystopian future. Destructive natures of Tokiyami's quirk. Tokiyami's quirk is called Dark Shadow, and it grants the users a shadowy monster-like being within the body that they can materialize and dematerialize at will. Dark Shadow is like a separate being connected with Tokiyami's. It's sentient, capable of speech. Depending on the darkness level is how strong Dark Shadow can be. If it's bright and sunny, Dark Shadow grows smaller and becomes weaker. If it's full on nighttime, Dark Shadow grows bigger and becomes stronger, but also more out of control. Other factors that contribute to Dark Shadow's power is Tokiyami's emotion. If he ever feels anything negative, this can amplify his powers and would try to take over Tokiyami's body and control him against his will. Tokiyami's quirk is very destructive and complex. From what I find is that there is a dark theory about Tokiyami's quirk, and that Dark Shadow is a part of a conjoined twin, and that will be saved for another tier. The Winged Nomu is Bakugo's childhood friend. This is a classic one. There was a Winged Nomu that took Midoriya during the Hero Killer arc, and people speculate whether the Winged Nomu is actually one of Bakugo's childhood friends. We haven't seen him since then, but the author made it very obvious that this is actually the case, and it's a lot darker than everyone thinks. The Winged Boy is actually the grandson of Dr. Tsubasa. If you translate it from the data book, and we later found out he owns private hospital to use patients for his experiments, which we've seen that in during the later seasons, and also orphanages. Dr. Tsubasa not only uses kids to accomplish these experiments, but also his own family members to get a hold of Midoriya and Bakugo since he was closest to them, making this theory very plausible, not because it all connects, but the author himself was leaving these hints and breadcrumbs for us to piece it all together. There's no difference between Class 1A and 1B, 1A just gets a spotlight. And that's true. I'm pretty sure it was explained when Deku got into Class 1A, they were assigned in random, and that there was no better and weaker class. Otherwise, Mineta wouldn't be in Class 1A or even Deku when he first joined UA High. The spotlight part mainly has to do with their connections with the pro heroes and their performances, Shoto with Endeavor, Deku with All Might, Ida with Ingenium, but if we're trying to differentiate the two classes based on power, then 1A takes the cake. Horikoshi's death threats is nothing new when it comes to these anime creators, especially when it comes to My Hero Academia. Horikoshi never addressed the death threats himself, but we can see some of the threats made for many different reasons. One being making Endeavor a good person and being more in touch with his family, not making certain relationships happen, Todoroki and Momo, and of course, Deku and Bakugo. My Hero Academia fandom follows up what I said earlier. Majority of the fans are obnoxious and are chronically online like I am, but not to the point where I send death threats to the creators and even the voice actors. If you ask anyone that is in touch with the anime space and ask which anime has the worst fandoms, the answer is most likely My Hero Academia for many reasons I've just explained. Especially in the shipping case, you will find people shipping characters that just makes absolutely no sense and actually borderline criminal. The extent of blatant murder, what I believe is referring to back in season 1 when Bakugo uses new equipment that enhances his explosion quirk to the point that All Might claims that would have killed Deku. All Might's foreshadowed death, from what I can find, is that it might have to do with Night Eye's prediction that All Might wouldn't survive in the future, either by All For One or Shigaraki, but instead we get to see All Might live and become the vice principal for UA in the future. Mirio almost gets One For All, which is pretty much true. All Might said it himself. If it wasn't for his encounter with Midoriya, he was going to select Mirio to be his next successor for One For All. Aoyama was quirkless, which also turns out to be true. Aoyama was born quirkless and his parents didn't want to be an outcast, so they contacted All For One to give him a quirk in exchange to work for him. People theorized early on in the series, especially when Aoyama tells Deku he is just like him. Jack Midoriya comes from a one-shot concept of My Hero Academia before it became a thing. Jack is what Deku originally looks like, except he is an adult and he is quirkless. He relies heavily on gadgets to help him fight crime, and that's pretty much it, and then it slowly turns into what we know today. Just the way quirkless are treated, from what I can find, is mainly from fan fictions, but it is an idea that in the world of My Hero Academia, discrimination towards quirkless people exists and that they are oppressed. What I wanted to happen in the story, I don't think it makes sense at that point. The world is 20% quirkless, or even less when it comes to the new generation, since I believe that 20% comes from the older generation, you know, the grandmas and grandpas and so on, and at that point the world is already accustomed to these new changes. The only real discrimination that happened in the series is the heteromorphs, but other than that, I don't think it makes any sense for a discrimination towards quirkless. Eri can bring people back from the dead is pretty much what it says. Eri's quirk Rewind can reverse a living being's body back to a previous state, and we've seen it in action. She was able to get Mirio's quirk back, Deku was able to use One For All at 100%, while Eri was constantly on overdrive, reversing any damage Deku is taking from One For All. But can she bring people back from the dead? Maybe. First, the quirk is stated to work on living beings. From my guess, she can heal a dead person but can't revive them. But who knows, maybe we might get a spin-off for the future generation with Eri, Koda, and Katsuma from the second film. My Hero Academia is set in the late 2100s, is a guess from when My Hero Academia takes place. We know it's in the future, but it could be set 100 years in the future, or even 200 years in the future. We know it's more than 100 because of All For One's existence, but someone did make a lengthy calculation on Reddit, and they concluded that it is actually set in the late 2100s. The second user of One For All is Bakugo's ancestor, is referring to back when the second user of One For All was revealed before the anime comes out, so people notice how similar Kudo looks like compared to Bakugo, and his outfit is also similar compared to Bakugo's hero outfit, so people theorize that Kudo is actually Bakugo's ancestor, which makes sense to them since in the second movie Bakugo was able to use One For All so effectively. It might be the Kudo genes within him that helped him sustain One For All's power, but as far as we know, that is not the case, but I do like the theory. I can't actually get behind on that one. Rei Todoroki is a victim of human trafficking. It's a dark topic. People theorize about Rei's position in the family. When you look at it in that way, you can see why people would think like that. Rei and Endeavor met through an arranged marriage, more specifically a quirk marriage, because Endeavor is seeking to create a child with a powerful combination of his fire quirk and Rei's ice quirk. Rei's family was in financial hardship, so to put her family in a better position, she would have to marry Endeavor for the money and also his need of creating a strong child. The second part of this is where it gets a little uncomfortable, and that is the age difference. Around the start of the series, Endeavor is 45 years old and Rei is only 4 years younger than him, making her 41 at the start. However, Toya, their first child, is around 23 to 24 years old, and Endeavor was ranked number 2 when he was 20 years old. So that means he was conceived when Endeavor was 21 to 22 years old, and Rei would have been around 17 to 18 years old, or even dangerously 16 years old when they were married. But that's if Endeavor right away lost hope that he isn't going to pass All Might when he became number 2 when he was only 20. I really hope that isn't the case, but when you do the math, the theory about Rei being a victim makes it even more sad. One For All gave Shigaraki his quirk. It's pretty much true. Just like All Might to Deku, Shigaraki was the next successor for All For One. Bakugo consequences. This is talking either that Bakugo never faced any real consequences for his action in the series, or this is referring to the fandom making fanfics of Bakugo facing consequences. Aside from that, the only consequence Bakugo faced was when he was taking the provisional license exam again because of his poor attitude along with Todoroki. Society allowing bad people to become heroes, or the flawed hero system. It's pretty much talking about how the hero system is flawed, but the society as a whole is flawed. This ranges from over-reliance on heroes, and the overpopulation of heroes as kids are more and more eager to become heroes, and also the flawed quirk diagnosis. If you don't get what I mean, or I might have worded wrong, people like Toga and Shigaraki, by society standards, their quirk are considered villainous and is treated differently. There's a whole video breaking it down about how the hero society is flawed. I'll link it down below for you guys to see if you guys want more information about it and in more in-depth details. Monoma and Toga are siblings. There's this theory going around that Monoma and Toga are siblings mainly because of their similar crazy personality and having the same blonde hair color, but other than that, there's not much to go off of. One for All is Asashi Midoriya. If you don't know who that is the name of Izuku's absent father, which is also saying that One for All is Izuku's father. This is all speculation. The manga is also finished, so we never get to see and know where is Izuku's dad. Discrimination and cults against other quirks. Discrimination against other quirks have been displayed in the series, like I mentioned earlier with Toga, but also includes Shinzo and Monoma because the society would consider their quirks as villainous. Little do we know, again, spoilers again for the final chapters if you haven't read the manga, Monoma ends up being in the top 10 heroes ranked. Shinzo would be accepted to class 1A. Another example for quirk discrimination would be the heteromorphs, the mutants. For cults, I guess you could say the Liberation Army, because not only they want to end quirk regulation laws so people can use their quirks freely, but they would also rank them depending how powerful their quirks are. The stronger your quirks are, the higher you would rank in this new society. No heaven or hell for One for All users. As the title says, once you pass away, if you're a One for All user, your soul will not be ascended or descended to the afterlife, but in a separate space where all the other former users gather and guide and help the next successor. This isn't a really talked about topic because there's no need to, since again, spoilers, Deku loses One for All and is quirkless again. But I guess you could say the souls for One for All is finally released and is now in peace, since One for All's purpose was to destroy All for One, so there's not much to go off of then. If Deku never had a quirk. There's a whole other timeline to go over, but obviously a lot would have changed. Mirio would have gotten One for All and become the most powerful hero to ever live. He would also end up being another victim of having a short lifespan. One for All shortens the lifespan of users that already have a quirk. Todoroki would never gotten the speech from Midoriya, which would still make him resentful towards his father and primarily become an ice user. He would also never save Ochako during the entrance exam. Deku would never show Ida humility back in season 1, which would lead to his potential death against Stain. There's a lot of negative drawbacks if Deku never gotten the quirk. And finally, the last tier. It's just a bunch of nonsense, but I find it hilarious. If this is disturbing to you, as some of the other ones I've explained already aren't disturbing, then you can click off. But if you guys are still here, let's dive right in. Shigaraki masturbates with the hands. I hope this doesn't get demonetized, but I gotta say how it is. It's just a theory after all. It's pretty much what it says. Shigaraki would use the hands to masturbate instead of his real ones because of his quirk decay. Anything he touches would wither away, so it kind of makes sense. But we've seen Shigaraki in the series kind of scratching his neck and his eyes, but hasn't decayed himself. Or that Shigaraki is just a freak, but who knows. Hawks is a hermaphrodite. This one, the only conclusion I found is fanfiction, so yeah, that's my hero for you. Kacchan Weaver 5. It's a 3-minute audio of 2 people role-playing as Deku and Bakugo, and they do whatever shippers always wanted them to do. If you want to bless your ears like I have, then you can just search it up for yourself. Deku committed suicide. If this doesn't get demonetized, well, bless YouTube. It's either between the fanfics of Deku taking the suicide route, or that is referring to when Bakugo literally in the first season tell Midoriya to take a swan dive off the roof so in the next life he can get a quirk and be a hero so that he doesn't waste his time on this life, which is pretty dark. Totally forgot about that moment since I was so far ahead in the series. Finally, kids' lives destroyed because of quirks. And this can mean many things. Kids are idolizing heroes and wanting to risk their lives at a young age, or the culmination of powerful quirks in the future, and that their body wouldn't be able to handle, and that the quirks are bound to get stronger and stronger than we can ever imagine. Or the idea of becoming an outlaw or a criminal, like how people were going crazy for Stain because of his ideologies. But regardless, the kids are at constant risk. And that wraps about the entirety of the My Hero Academia Iceberg. What do you guys think about this? This is my first ever Iceberg, and this has also been a while to show my face, quite a long time. So far, the ones I've been going over is pretty hilarious, pretty disturbing, but also very interesting. If you guys want more Iceberg videos, I mean, I've been quite enjoying this, you know, doing research and learning more about stuff about the shows and also other media that I haven't known about. Comment down below if you guys want me to do any other animes Iceberg videos or other series of modern media that I should cover, or anything pretty interesting. I mean, this is probably going to be one of my most biggest videos, longest videos I've ever done in quite a while, aside from, you know, stream stuff back then. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.